Hello, Sanctuary Seekers. Welcome to the Arena Sanctuary. My name is Dan. The focus of our channel is to be an educational and relaxed environment for Magic the Gathering Arena. Please remember to click subscribe and the like button. It really does make a difference for the channel. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Let's take a look at a current standard staple, Mono Blue Aggro. The list I'm showing today was played by Autumn Burchett in the Pro Tour Cleveland Mythic Championship 1. Autumn piloted this deck to a first place finish, which is why I chose to show it off. Quick disclaimer, this is one variation of Mono Blue. Some Mono Blue decks will have slightly different compositions. No list is inherently worse or better than its variations. And I want to simply share that just because this is one way to play Mono Blue does not mean it is the only way. Let's get into why Mono Blue Aggro is so strong. Mono Blue is an extremely simple deck in its construction and play and has a lot of answers to the standard metagame. The cards are straightforward and don't require combo setup. The deck functions on 1, 2, and 3 drops, making our play choices simpler than other decks. In a metagame with highly aggressive decks like Mono Red and White Weenie, and hardcore control like Esper, Mono Blue can effectively deal with both. Let's take a high-level look at the cards in this Mono Blue Aggro deck. We'll start with our enchantments here at the top since we only run 4 of them. The Curious Obsession. Costs 1 blue. It's an enchantment, an enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't attack with a creature this turn, sacrifice Curious Obsession. This enchantment is a big part of our engine. We attach this to our flyers or to Mistcloak Herald, and we continue to swing in and do damage and draw cards every time we hit a player. This is really big for us as it continues to search through our deck to find all of the answers that we need. Just remember, if this is attached to a creature, you must attack each turn, or else Curious Obsession will be sacrificed at the end of the turn. This deck then runs 17 creatures. We run 4 Merfolk Tricksters, a great 2/2 body for 2 blue for disrupting creature effects, as well as a great panic blocker since you can flash in at any time. 1 Mistcloaked Herald, an unblockable 1/1 for 1 blue that is a great target for Curious Obsession and requires our opponent to spend removal getting rid of it since it is unblockable. 4 Pteramander, a 1/1 for 1 blue with flying that has a strong Adapt 4 ability. Pteramander is a tough creature to handle since it is a flyer, and when you adapt a 5/5 flyer, it becomes an immediate threat. 4 Siren Stormtamers, a 1/1 for 1 blue with flying that has an ability for 1 blue that allows us to counter a spell that targets us or a creature. Stormtamer as a flyer makes him difficult, but his real value is having him on board with another more important creature as a cheap counter against removal. 4 Tempest Djinn, the Granddaddy, the Finisher, a 0/4 for 3 blue that has +1/+0 for each basic island we control. At a minimum, he is a 3/4 for 3. A true value play is with 4 mana open. You play Djinn for 3 as a 4/4 and leave 1 mana open for a counter or dive down. Next, in our instants and sorceries, we run 20, starting with Chart a Course. A sorcery for 1 and 1 blue. Draw 2 cards and discard a card unless you attacked with a creature this turn. The value of this card comes in the second main after you have attacked. This allows for 2 cards to stay in your hand. We only run 1 since it is a sorcery and we have other cheaper card draw options. 4 Dive Down, an instant for 1 blue. Target creature you control gets +0/+3 and hexproof until end of turn. What a fun card. The list is too long for what this cheap instant shuts down, but I will name a few. All of Mono Red Burn, Vraska's Contempt, Mortify, Cry of the Canarium. The hexproof prevents anything that targets, and +0/+3 gives us enough protection against something like Cry of the Canarium. 1 Entrancing Melody, a sorcery for X and 2 blue. Gain control of target creature with converted mana cost of X. Fun card to steal opponent threats. Powerful against Grixis as we can steal Bolas, and great against Izzet to steal their big threats like Phoenixes or Drakes. 2 Essence Captures. An instant for 2 blue. Counters target creature spell and puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control. Get rid of big threats, make our threats bigger, and end games faster. 1 Negate. An instant for 1 and 1 blue. Counter target non-creature spell. Great for getting rid of everything from Rhythm of the Wild to Eldest Reborn. Don't forget, this also deals with Planeswalkers. 4 Ops. An instant for 1 blue. Scry 1, draw 1 card. Ideal for end of an opponent's turn. We can take a look and see what we're going to draw and decide if we need that or if we want to go to the bottom. Sets us up for quote-unquote 2 draw turns. 3 Spell Pierce. An instant for 1 blue. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. Great for early game counters, and becomes a bit weaker in the late game but can force opponents to burn more mana than they would like. And finally, 4 Wizard's Retort. An instant for 1 And 2 blue. Spell costs 1 less if you control a wizard. Counter target spell. In our sideboard, against aggro decks, we want to bring in Deep Freeze, Essence Capture, if against creatures, and potentially Surge Mare. Against midrange, we want to bring in Disdainful Stroke, Jace for extra card draw, Entrancing Melody for their big creatures, and possibly Negates if there are not a lot of creatures being played. Against control, we want to bring in Entrancing Melody if they play 1 or 2 creatures, Negates to counter Planeswalkers, or other counters. We bring in our 20th land if we pull in higher mana sideboard cards. Let's take this deck for a spin on the ladder. Mono blue aggro on the ladder, let's go. We always, when given the option, want to play first. Our success is predicated on being out ahead of our opponent. Let's take a look at my opening hand here. The great and sometimes detrimental thing about mono blue aggro is that our cards are cheap, so having a low land hand isn't horrible. Here I have 2 lands, an Opt, a Terramander, a Spell Pierce, a Djinn, and a Retort. I like that I have a turn 1 play in Terramander, and I like that I have an Opt as an option for turn 2 if I get stuck. What makes this hand keepable to me is the Spell Pierce to also have turn 2 disrupt my opponent early on, as well as the Djinn in hand for when I get more lands to be my finisher. This is why I choose to keep. Turn 1, as explained, is going to be the Terramander. This really helps us establish early game presence. Our opponent drops a swamp and we draw a land. An ideal opening hand will have 3 lands, but with the answers in hand we can keep a 2-land hand. We then swing in for 1 and hold our mana open to mess with his next play if we can, or opt at the end of their turn for extra draw. Our opponent plays another land and does nothing, so we opt here on the end of their turn to draw. In response to our opt, our opponent plays a Moment of Craving to ice our Terramander. Exactly what we want. We have Spell Pierce open and we want our stuff to stay on the board. We then scry from the opt and see and keep an island. We do this to enable our Djinn on turn 4, but also bring our Retort online. In our draw step, we draw an Entrancing Melody, which is a hilarious card, and play our 3rd land. Some may be tempted to play Djinn, but playing him with 4 mana is a better value as we get a 4/4 and keep 1 mana open. We go into combat and swing for 1, leaving our mana open to counter. As you can see here, our opponent decides to concede game 1. When you play mono blue, expect this to happen a lot, especially if you have good draws and a good hand like we did. At this point, we have no clue what he is playing. He did not reveal a second color and only played 1 card. This is very tricky to sideboard cards in since we do not have a clue as to what we need answers for. The best thing to do is keep your deck as is and go in for game 2. Some good cards to sideboard in against us that make our lives trickier are Thought Erasure or Duress. This allows our hand to be seen and our opponent to discard our cards. Knowing our hand is a huge advantage for our opponent because they can then play around us. Counters and removal also mess us up. Going second can put us behind, so having a good opening hand can make the difference. My opponent takes almost a full minute to sideboard. Don't get frustrated if your opponent spends a long time sideboarding. It is part of the game, so just be patient. Our first hand at glance is not keepable. However, this is a rare opportunity where we can actually semi-successfully play a 1-land hand. We have 1 land, 1 Curious Obsession, love this card, 2 Dive Downs, 1 Miscloaked Herald, 1 Terramander, and 1 Trickster. We have plays into turn 5 before we need a second land. Now is the second land helpful? Absolutely. We'd love to play Curious Obsession turn 2 and have Dive Down open for protection, but alas, the game is also supposed to be fun, so let's rock it. You'll notice our opponent mulled to 6. Having to mull sucks, no other way around it. Understand why you mull though. Some hands are unplayable. You get all lands or no lands and you have to cycle that through. Do not get discouraged if you have to mull. I will mull to 5 on occasion, but rarely if ever will I go past 5. Turn 1, our opponent comes with the swamp and then we draw land. Ask and you shall receive. In all seriousness though, we were lucky. The magic gods could have said no to us as well. If you keep my ridiculous hand, be warned you are playing with fire. We go Herald on turn 1. There is an argument for Terramander. I don't really think there is a wrong answer here. Both are good targets for Curious Obsession on turn 2. Our opponent drops a swamp and plays Treasure Map. This is a great card for ramp and our opponent is looking to gain treasure for mana. Our turn 2 play is written for us. Play a land, drop Curious Obsession, and swing. We leave 1 mana open to protect Herald if needed and we start our card draw engine. We draw an island here and keep our mana dreams alive. Our opponent starts the treasure map shenanigans and scries and draws for turn. He plays a swamp and holds 2 mana open. We draw another land and drop our second Curious Obsession on Herald to make our engine work twice. With 2 mana open, we are sitting pretty. We swing in for 3 and draw twice, pulling more land. Earlier punishment for a 1-land hand? Maybe. The good news is this continues to thin our deck closer to our answers. Our opponent finally plays a second color, blue, which means Thought Erasure, a brutal card against us, our deck being revealed is less than ideal. He dumps one of our dive downs, which makes sense given that it is a way we protect our creatures. He uses treasure map again, leaving him 1 turn away from getting treasure. On our turn, we play a land and decide to go to combat. Nothing in our hand is super inspiring, so getting some extra draw will help us find what we need. We swing in for 3 and draw another dive down that our opponent cannot see and an opt. With mana open, we opt to scry and draw and get a Djinn. We now need to discard and we choose Terramander. With our Djinn ready for next turn, he presents a much better threat than Terramander, which is why we decide to dump him. At the beginning of our opponent's next turn, he uses treasure map again for the scry and for the 3 treasures. Extra mana is always fun. Our opponent really needs to make a play here. We are so far ahead that letting us continue to ball out of control makes it unlikely that our opponent can come back. At the end of his turn, since he did nothing, we opt for extra draw and pull another dive down. We draw another island, start the turn, and play an island, then drop the Djinn to push the endgame. Our next goal is to swing in and draw some more cards to keep our engine alive. After we pull an Obsession, he tries to Vraska's Contempt us. I believe he forgot that we had a dive down in hand. Easy decision for us as it takes away his mana as well. We resolve the Contempt, and with that, he concedes. Sometimes you just run out of plays, and this is common against Mono Blue. The deck functioned in the way we wanted and was consistent throughout. A solid win for us on the ladder. Thank you again for watching this episode of the Arena Sanctuary. Have tips, suggestions, or feedback? Please leave a comment down below and follow us on Twitter and connect with us on Facebook at Arena Sanctuary. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. The Arena Sanctuary is part of the Creators Quarters community. For more great Magic content, click on the playlist link in the top right.